Hello and welcome to Coffee with Credible. During this session, we are going to be talking about the TX Plus functionality in Credible. More specifically, we're going to be looking at how to create an initial ISP and an annual ISP service in Credible using the TX Plus functionality. We're really not going to be talking about clinical documentation in your TX Plus. So if you have questions around actual problem statement, goal statements, descriptions, modalities to be used or to be checked off, regulatory information that's required to be in your ISPs, please address those to your supervisor or to the clinical analyst for your department. Because today's session really is focused on how to build the TX Plus in Credible, and so that it works with your service and it pulls into the service where we can see it attached to the service. So let's get started. There's a few things that are really important when building the TX Plus, and the very most important thing right here at the top, the date of the service must be on or after the start date in the header and in each PGOI in the TX Plus. And by PGOI, we mean problem, goals, objectives, interventions. So what this means is when you're creating your TX Plus, there's a start date in the header and each of your PGOIs have a start date. You want to be sure that the date of the service is on or after those dates. If the TX Plus, if your ISP starts on May 2nd, that's today's date, May 2nd, then the date of the service must be either May 2nd or after. And if it's not May 2nd or after, your TX Plus is not going to pull into the service. And we're going to say this over and over, and we're going to show you how that works. Before completing a ISP service, be sure that the TX Plus can be seen in the tree on the left in the form. If you can't see it there, and it's not pulling into the service. So if you can't see it, complete the sign and submit page, capture your signatures, and click the Save Billing Info button. Do not sign and submit the service if the TX Plus is not pulling in. And then we want you to contact the Credible team. This is really important. When you pull that TX Plus in, you should see it pull in on the right side of your form, and you should see it in its tree form over on the left side of the form. We'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. But we want to be sure that if you don't see both of those happening, one or the other or both is missing, don't sign and submit it. Capture all the billing information and then contact the Credible team. In most situations, we can get the TX Plus and the service to work when it's not been signed and submitted. Once it's signed and submitted, the contents in the TX Plus section of your service cannot be changed. So once you sign and submit it, if it's not pulling in, it's never going to pull in, and we kind of have to start all over. So many times we can get that fix in place before you sign and submit it. Before starting an annual plan, please remember to end date the TX Plus in your header and each PGOI to be on a date that's before the start date of the new TX Plus. So we do run into issues with being able to create a new TX Plus when you haven't put in an end date in the ISP itself or any of the PGOIs. Sometimes we see people put an end date in the header, and then they don't have end dates in their PGOIs, and then they pull into, Credible will let you create a new TX Plus for the new ISP year, but then you're also seeing these PGOIs from the previous year pull into your new year. You don't want that to happen either. And if there's no date in the TX Plus header, you can't even create a new TX Plus. So always be sure that it's dated for an end date that's prior to the date of your service and the end, so that everything can pull in, you have access and it pulls it properly. And at discharge, remember to always end date the TX Plus in the header in each PGOI, it just be the date of the discharge. This is really important for those people who are in services, they're discharged and then they come back. And what happens is they come back and then we can't create a new TX Plus. And we're trying to get through an intake. There's a lot to be done in the intake between the consents and the assessment and whatever. And we kind of come to a standstill at the TX Plus. And it kind of really does frustrate the intake clinicians because they can't get that TX Plus started. So please be sure that everything gets end dated when you discharge somebody. So we're going to repeat some of these things over and over and over during the course of the session, because some of these things we really want to get drilled in. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and we're going to look at creating an initial ISP service TX Plus. So when we're creating an initial plan, this is going to be for those individuals who've never received services from WTCSB before, or it's also for individuals who have been discharged and are now re-enrolling. Be sure to check the TX Plus to ensure that there's no active TX Pluses. And if there are, end date those for a date that's prior to the date of the intake. And remember, the date of your ISP service must be on or after the start date of the TX Plus and all the PGOIs. So with that, let's go ahead. We're going to work with our initial ISP client, and we're going to create a TX Plus or an ISP service that actually starts for today. So we're having an intake today, and having an intake today for my initial ISP client. And we're going to go ahead and schedule their ISP service for today, May 2nd. So to do that, I can click anywhere on my calendar. I'm going to select my client. The client doesn't drop down into this drop down box. Click this ellipsis here. Okay. Put the ellipsis, and now I'm going to search for my client, and I'm doing the initial ISP client. Here's my client here, initial ISP. I'm going to click on their ID number, and it will populate into the client box here. And then I'll select my service type. So today I'm working in our CCM program, and we're going to be looking for the CCM Individ Service Plan. This is the ISP service. And so this is the ISP service for all of our MH programs, SA programs, and some of our clients receiving IDDD case management. Some receive an individual service plan this way, others receive their WAMs, which is a whole other ballgame. But the functionality is, pretty much the same here. So for whatever program if you're using the TX Plus. I'm going to go ahead and pick my location. So I'm going to be holding this in the community, my date and the duration, your time, the start time and the duration. And you should talk to your supervisor about what duration should look like. We're going to leave group activity blank. We're not adding to the wait list. I'm going to leave that blank. You can choose to put in a note. The note should not have any HIPAA information or should not be related to the service itself, but more like a note for you to remember to do something. So oftentimes we might see things like get consent or things like that kind of jog the clinician's memory to make sure that they do something during the session. We can go ahead and either click the schedule button or click the begin service button here because I'm scheduling it and beginning at the same day. So I'm going to go ahead and click the begin service button here. Well, it's not assigned to the team, so not sure why that's happening. Hang on, I can fix that very quickly here. Initial ISP. Children's case management. Okay, sorry about that. Let's go back and try that again, shall we? I'm going to schedule my appointment here. I'm going to click on this ellipsis. Initial ISP. And I'm going back again to CCM Individ Service Plan right here. Again, my locations in the community. The time is, again, the time that I'm meeting with them. So I'm going to stick with 1 o'clock here. Again, check with your supervisor around duration. Group activities blank. Add to waitlist is blank. Notes are optional. I'm going to go ahead and click the Begin Service button. There we go. That looks better. Okay, so here, once inside the form, you're going to select the form or the category here over on the right that pertains to your program. So for IDDD case management, they're going to be selecting this category here. And most of our MH and SA programs will be selecting the initial annual ISP here. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. And we're going to fill this form out. So this is the initial plan. So I'm going to go ahead and select initial. I'm going to put in my start date, which is today's date. And the ISP end date, you should talk to your supervisors about what the ISP end date is for your program. We do have some programs that might have shorter term ISP end dates. However, the end date should be no more than 365 days. If it's leap year, 366, but you add that extra day for the leap year. But otherwise, we want it to be, no more than a year. So I'm going to go ahead. We're in children's case management. Theirs usually lasts a year. So we're going to end date this on May 1st, 2023. So down here, we're going to put in our ISP summary review dates. So for most of our MH programs and our SA programs, we're needing to do a summary review every 90 days. MH outpatient is a little bit different. They have a review that's due every 6 sessions or every 90 days, whichever comes first, a little more difficult to track. And ID case management, they do theirs just every quarter, like clockwork, boom, 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 every quarter. So it's a little bit different for them as well. But for most of our MH programs and for our SA programs, like I said, it is a 90-day date. So what I'm going to do is put in here for the summary run review date is 90 days from today's date, because I need to have a review done prior to the 90 days. And if you aren't sure how to calculate that, I do like to go up to Google and I search for my date calculator. And it's usually this first one that pops right up. And I can, in here, put in today's date. And I can add or subtract here. I'm going to add 90 days. And then I calculate the new date. And that gives me July 31, 2022. So I'm going to go ahead and add that right in here, July 31, 2022. So for many of our MH and SA programs, it is optional to leave the summary 2, 3, and 4 blank. Once you have your next summary review, you're really going to be doing it 90 days from the date that you did your review. So it kind of resets itself. So feel free to leave these blank. You can put in every 90 days from here. You're going to come up short without having a review at the end of the year. If you do that, that's okay. It'll straighten itself out as the year goes along. But these dates aren't actually going to end up matching what you end up doing in real life. So you can leave this blank. For our IDDD folks, I recommend that you do go ahead and put in all your 4-quarter reviews. We'll keep scrolling down. Be sure that you have your diagnoses pulled in here, which we have. If it's not, you can go to the client intake and add that diagnosis, and then you can pull that right on in before you sign and submit. Down here, we're going to put in the different assessments that you use. We have all sorts of assessments. We have the CIA, that's the clinical intake assessment. We have the CNA, comprehensive needs assessment. Perhaps you completed a social assessment if you're ID case management. They also have the guides that they use. Maybe you use the Columbia. The DLA that's been used, which is actually a great document to help formulate goals and objectives. Maybe use the GAINS, a PHQ-9. There's any number of assessments, that you can use. This list can really go on, so you put in whatever you've used. Verbal consent for the ISP was obtained due to COVID-19. If you're doing this via Zoom, A telehealth, if your program allows that, you could select yes here. If not, you're doing it in person. Because I'm going to say no, because I'm doing this in person. I'm going to say no here, which means I need to get some signatures on this form before I leave the session. And I'm going to click complete. So now this is where the fun stuff begins. We're going to go ahead now and pull that, create that TX Plus. So this is a brand new client to us. We have this Add TX Plus link here. And if you don't happen to have that Add TX Plus, that's going to be covered another time on what do we do when you don't see this Add TX Plus, but you've got an ISP that you're trying to build here. We'll talk about that in another session. But for now, the Add TX Plus is here, brand new client. It should be here. So I'm going to click this Add TX Plus link, and it's going to take me to the TX Plus builder. So in this builder, I get to build my TX Plus. So the first thing I do is I make sure I'm in the right program. This is the program that I'm going to be building this in. This is the program that I'm going to be completing my summary reviews against. That has to be pulled in here. My start date is today. I'm going to put in my end date, which is a year from now, May 1st, 2023. And I need to select this active checkbox. This is a new functionality we have, so please be sure that you're always checking this active checkbox. If you don't check it, it's not going to pull it in, and we're going to run into other problems. So make sure you check that box. So now I'm going to add my problem, goals, objectives, and intervention. So first I have to start with problems. Just be sure when you're building your TX Plus that you have at least one problem. Every problem has at least one goal. Every goal has at least one objective. Every objective has at least one intervention. You can have multiple problems, goals, objectives, and interventions. Just know that you need at least one for, each one child is what the goals, objectives, interventions are like a child for each parent that it links to above. And we'll show you how that looks. So first, let's start with the problem. I'm going to add my problem here. You type in your problem statement. And again, if you're caught up with wording, you're not sure really what to go in here, that's where you need to meet with your supervisor. But we're going to make this easy. I'm just going to type in problem 1 for now, but you'll type in an actual problem statement. My start date, again, it's today's date, 5/2/2022. And I'm going to go ahead and give my end date of 5/1/2023. And I need to write a better description of my problem. All right. And my element status, this is active. We'll talk about completed and inactive another time when we go through how to do your ISP summary reviews. But as long as we're going to be reporting on it, it's going to be active. While this box is yellow, and if for some reason it turns red during all that, that's okay. We're going to click in it and make it yellow. And now we need to add a goal to it. So see how the goal pops down. And we do the same thing here. I'm going to, and target dates, I didn't talk about those. Target dates are optional. You may have some problem goals, objectives, interventions that are going to be a little short term. And that's okay. You can put in this target date and you don't have to have a year long end date. It can be a shorter term. You might have an ISP that does last for a year, but you might have some very short term problems, goals, objectives, interventions, and that's okay to say that here. I'm going to add my description, in more details. And now I need to add an objective to my goal statement. So as long as this is yellow, I'm going to click objective, and we'll type in the objectives. My start date and my end date, and a better description. Now I need to add an intervention to my objectives. One. And I know I've been typing these in. I find that to be a little bit faster sometimes, but you can do the calendar picker as well. We'll put in a better description. And my element is active. And this time, who's responsible? And at what frequency are we going to be monitoring this? So whatever you pick here, just remember, this is what you have to be sure you're documenting on, whether progress note or summary review or something. You have to be able to document this frequency. So I'm going to say quarterly for now, and we're going to pick a modality. And this is where whatever modality you're picking here, please be sure that you're discussing with your supervisor as to what the proper modalities should be for your ISPs, your client-specific needs. Now we can go through here and we can add more problems, goals, objectives, and interventions. I can add multiple goals to this problem if I want to do that. So now I just have the one. I'll click in the problem box and make it yellow. And then I can click goals here. And now it drops another goal down here for me to fill out. Let's say I want another intervention to this objective. I do the same thing. I'm going to click in my objective box and make it yellow. And then I can click interventions up here. And now it's given me a new intervention. If at any time you make an error, you click and you add a PGOI that you don't need, while you're developing this right there with the client, you can say, oh, you know, I didn't mean to click that. I can get rid of that. I can click this red X and it will get rid of that box. Keeping in mind, the only time we delete a problem, goal, objective, or intervention is before we have finished in creating the ISP or the TX Plus itself. Once it's created and we have it pulled into the service and it's signed by the client, we no longer would delete anything out of the ISP. If something's no longer needed, we will end date it, and then you can add new things. And we'll talk about that when we talk about how to create the summary reviews. I'm going to get rid of this goal statement here just for ease, but your ISPs will have multiple problems, goals, objectives, and interventions. So once this is all done, I'm going to go up here and click the Save button. Once I do that, it should pull it in, pulls it in nicely, and I see this tree over here. We have these pulling in here and the tree over here. This is successful. If you get up here and it just says collapse all, and there's just like a little tiny box here that you really can't do anything with, and the tree is not here, it's broken. It hasn't pulled in. So those are the situations I don't want you to be signing and submitting. In the meantime, though, this is exactly how it should work. And as long as you've got all your dating right, this is exactly what's going to happen. And you check that active checkbox. So you're going to scroll through, making sure that everything you put in is here and that there's nothing there that you don't want, i.e. nothing carrying over from the previous years. We talked about a little bit about that before. Don't type anything in these large white boxes on your way down. This looks good. I've got everything in here. Leave this blank. Don't check anything on the way down. Don't add anything into these on the way down. Just leave them blank. And then we're going to hit the complete button here. Now we're here, back to the beginning. You still have your tree looking good. Click the complete button here. And we're going on to the sign and submit page. So on the sign and submit page, be sure you verify everything, your program, the service type, your location. There's a diagnosis pulling in here. Again, if there's no diagnoses, go to the client intake and get that diagnosis into the nav bar and let that pull in. And be sure that it's a diagnosis for your program, MH diagnoses for MH programs, SA diagnoses for SA programs, ID diagnoses for ID programs. Then we pick the recipient. So I'm doing this face-to-face with the clients. ISPs must be done face-to-face. So I have client face-to-face. I pick my billing group. If you aren't sure what your billing group is, please talk to your supervisor. Most MHSA programs and for ID case management, it is WTCSB. We can leave a supervising physician blank and we don't need to override. These are for billing purposes for outpatient and medical services. So we're going to leave these blank. Now we have the date of the service, which is today. I have my start time and my end time. So be sure that your durations are correct for the type of service that you're creating, and you can always talk to your supervisor about that as well. Scroll down and make sure you get your signatures. I'm going to capture the client signature here. And if there's a parent or legal guardian, you would capture that here. And if other people were attending, you can capture those signatures here. Maybe another provider attended, or their best friend, or an aunt or uncle, or grandparent, or somebody. All that's really great. We'd like to have those people at our ISP meetings. Lots of valuable input. Capture their signatures. And then you're going to leave yours blank, and because you're going to fill out your password, will stamp your signature for you. So now I'm going to click the sign and submit button. And when it finishes, it takes me to the service list where I will now immediately verify my service. Make sure all this information is correct, make sure your duration is correct, and make sure everything is in your form and that the TX Plus is pulled in and the signatures are here. If you see any problem, anything up here, your duration is wrong, you're missing information in the form, the diagnoses can't be fixed in this form after, but you can fix like the type of ISP, the start date, end date, the review dates, your assessment, your verbal consent. You can fix duration before approved. The diagnoses cannot be fixed after it's been approved, and the TX Plus cannot be fixed after it's been approved. You can collect signatures after it's been approved, or even after sign and submit by clicking the sign button, and you can come in here and capture additional signatures. If everything is correct, and you have permission to approve the service, go ahead and do it. If you don't have permissions to approve the service, then don't approve it and seek out that person who should approve it for you. And if certain, like I said, certain things up here, the duration, that can be fixed by your supervisor. If you're missing fields in here, you can select this edit full visit button before you approve it and fix it. If other things are missing that you can't fix, you need to contact your supervisor and or the credible team so we can tell you what you need to do in order to fix it. And if things aren't pulling in and they need to, probably going to mean another service has to be done. But this looks really good to me. Go ahead and approve it. So this is how we do the initial plan. So let's go ahead now and talk about an annual plan. Annual plan are for people who are already enrolled in services. They already have an ISP, and it's time now for their new ISP to come into play. We're going to be having an annual plan meeting or a planning meeting. If maybe your plans don't go full annual, they go shorter, that's fine. Still, it's the same process functionality. We have a plan, and now we're going to do a new plan. So some of the things to remember here is be sure to verify that that current ISP has an end date in the header, and all the PGOIs, again, needs to be a day before the new ISP begins. So if my new ISP is going to begin on 5/2, I need to be sure everything is end dated as 5/1 or before. Be sure to verify that the current ISP has an end date. Schedule your annual ISP service on the calendar for the day after the end date of the current ISP. So if the current ISP expires on 4/15, schedule your annual ISP service on 4/16. You want everything in the current ISP to be expired 4/15 or before, and then everything in your new ISP is going to begin on 4/16, and your service will begin on 4/16. The scheduled date of the service must be on or after the start date of the TX Plus and the PGOIs. So again, if your ISP starts on 4/16, your ISP service must be 4/16 or after. So in this case, we're going to do 4/16, makes it cleaner. Be sure you check that active checkbox on your TX Plus. And here's where we're going to use the Save Billing Info function to save clients' signatures for a date and time the annual ISP service is completed, if that date's in advance. If I'm creating my annual ISP today on 5/2, I'm going to create my brand new, I'm going to create a service today, a meeting with a client today. I'm creating my service today, starting my TX Plus today. I'm going to go ahead and get all the signatures there today. But let's say I'm having my meeting on 5/2, but my plan isn't actually going to begin until 5/6. I'm going to schedule that in advance. And that advanced data service, that advanced start date of my TX Plus, I'm going to use that save billing info function to save my client signatures for that date in the future. So let's take a look and we'll show you how this works. I'm going to come back to my schedule. Like I said, I'm having an annual meeting today on 5/2, but my ISP is not going to begin until 5/6. So I've already got my ISP scheduled here. My client's name is Annual ISP. I've already got it on the calendar because I had scheduled it for them in advance, and I put it on my calendar. But I'm going to be meeting with them today. I know it's going to begin on 5/6. So in these cases, your progress note is going to be reflective of 5/2 because that's the date I actually met with the client. But my ISP is going to have to begin on 5/6 to get around a lot of those dating issues, and that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and click this service here, and we're going to begin the service, and we're going to open it up. Again, I'm working in our children's case management program. So I'm going to click the begin service button. Okay. So the first thing we do again is we're going to use this initial annual ISP over here on the right. And again, talk to your supervisor about which is the best form for you. And we did go over that a little bit before, but I'm going to do the initial annual ISP. This time I'm selecting annual plan. My start date here is 5/6. So I'm going to be sure I put 5/6. Children's case management, again, they do a year. So I'm going to pick 5/5/2023 as my end date. And again, I'm going to go to my date calculator to figure out what is 90 days from 5/6. So here, I'm going to select 5/6. And I'm going to add 90 days. Still have all this in here. So I'll calculate the new date. And it looks like that's August 4. So I'm going to put in August 4 as my first summary review date. Again, these are optional for the most MH and SA programs because your 90 days is going to reset. Now, this client doesn't have a diagnosis. So hang on to this for just a second, and we're going to show you how we go back and add that diagnosis. First, though, I'm going to fill out the rest of my form. What were some of my assessments that I used? With Columbia, I did a CNA, I did a DLA, and again, any number of assessments that you've been using, you can type in here. I'm again meeting with this client face-to-face. So with the verbal consent, I'm not getting verbal consent, I'm getting live consent. So I'm going to say no because I'm meeting with them face-to-face. I'm going to hit this complete button. But now I'm going to go tackle my diagnosis issue. And what I'm going to do here is select the client intake link here. And then it pulls up the client's profile right within my form. And then I'm going to locate up here the icon for the diagnosis, which I think is this stethoscope. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm still in my form. It pulls open the diagnoses. And here is where I'm going to add diagnoses for this child. So remember, only people that are qualified to do so by regulation can make a diagnosis. Anybody can enter the diagnoses in the chart, but we always give credit to that licensed person or that person who's qualified to give the diagnosis. So for mental health diagnoses that we work with, it must be a physician, the psychiatrist can do it, a licensed individual or like a licensed professional counselor, an LCSW. They're the ones that are primarily giving these diagnoses. There's also a couple other licensed folks who can do it, but those are the primary ones that we would use. But so you should have that diagnosis from the licensed person. If it's not already in here, you would have it documented somewhere in paper. So we're going to add that in. And for this child, we're going to give this child, we're going to try to give them an ADHD, which should be able to just start typing in, and let's see what falls. Here we go. So I have to do more than ADHD, have to actually start typing in attention deficit, and you find the one that has been assigned or given to this client by the appropriate person. So in this case, we're going to say it's ADHD disorder combined type. When this pops up, you always want to save without the ICD-9. Don't ever save with ICD-9, save without ICD-9. We're looking for this F code. If you save with the ICD-9, it pulls in a wrong code. Save without the ICD-9. So put that in here. In here, you would give credit to the person who diagnosed them, and that should be, like I said, a physician, a licensed person. So let's say that's me, and I'm going to put in my credentials. You can put down, if you have the date that it was diagnosed, you can do that. If you have a date, an onset date, you can put that in. Sometimes we don't always have these. If you know it was prior to admission to our board, you can put that in, but sometimes we don't always know those. And then you should select the default for your program. So this is a mental health diagnosis. So I'm going to actually default it for both of these mental health programs the clients enrolled in. And what this will do is it's going to pull this over to your sign and submit page, so you don't have to go looking through the laundry list of diagnoses on the sign and submit page. Some people have quite a few diagnoses. You want to be sure it's your mental health diagnoses, if it's an MH program, or your SA diagnoses, or your ID diagnoses, depending on the program. And then we're going to come over here, and we're going to hit the save button. It saves that diagnosis. So now what I can do is come back over to my form, my initial annual ISP form right here, and I can open that back up, and now the diagnosis has flown right in. Here it is. Everything's in here. And now I can hit the complete button again. Now I'm saving that with the diagnoses in it. So now we're going to go add our TX Plus. So in this particular case, everything in this client's previous TX Plus has been end dated appropriately. So I get to see my add TX Plus. Everything in the previous TX Plus is end dated for May 5th or before. So I see my add TX Plus link. I'm going to go ahead and click it, and now I'm going to build my TX Plus. So I get this, the client already has a TX Plus for this program for this time frame. Please change the dates. And we're going to just go ahead and ignore this. We're going to say okay, but essentially what this is saying, see the start date here is 5/2. What's this saying is that on 5/2 today, there's a TX Plus that's covering today's date. That's the one that's going to be ending on May 5th. So I already know that. That's okay. I'm going to change the start date anyways. So I'm going to say, okay, I got it. I'm going to make sure my program's pulling in, which is CCM. Now I'm going to change my start date to May 6th. So that's going to resolve that error that I just had. And I'm going to put in my end date. And so here we're going to go a whole year again, and it's going to go through May 5. And I'm going to check the active checkbox. So now I'm going to add my problems, goals, objectives, and interventions. Make sure your start date matches the start date up here, 5/6. And again, 5/6 is the same as date as I've scheduled on my calendar, 5/6. Go in and throw in these problem goals and objectives, and I'm going to be kind of quiet while I do that. Oops. Objective. Item 5/6. And I'm going to add an intervention. Oops. And all of these are active. I'm going to make myself responsible. Whoever needs to be responsible, select my frequency and my modality. Again, you might need to talk to your supervisor about what some of those things. Now you've noticed, in this case, I didn't add any end dates. That's okay. I'm going to go up here to the problem statement and I'm going to add my end date 5/5/2023. Do that, it adds that end date straight down the line. So from here, I can again add more problems, goals, objectives, and interventions like we went over earlier. In the interest of time, I'm just going to keep this the way it is because this is looking pretty good. So now I'm going to click my save button and you see everything pulls in. I have it in my tree and I have this representation here on the right side. Again, if you just have a box under this collapse all sign and you aren't seeing this tree over here on the left, that's a problem. So we're going to just capture the billing info and you're not going to sign and submit in that case. And in this case, also, because this is a future dated service, you're not going to be able to sign and submit it anyways. But if you're having an issue, you'll contact a credible team, but this looks really good. And we're going to go straight down. We're going to make sure everything is pulled in. More importantly, make sure nothing from the previous plan is pulling in. If something from the previous plan is pulling in, we can fix that. That'll be a session for a later date, but we can fix that while it's all in your incompletes and get those out of the way. And I'm going to go through here and make sure everything's pulling in properly. This looks really good. There's nothing I don't want. Everything I do want is here, and I click the complete button. Then back here to my main form, click the complete button again. So now I'm on my sign and submit page. I'm going to verify my program. I'm going to verify the individual service plan. My location is in the community. Here's my diagnoses. And then the recipient, again, I'm doing this face-to-face. My billing group is WTCSP. Again, if you don't know what it is, talk to supervisor. We don't need a supervising physician and we don't need to override. So now we get to the billing information. And this is where it gets a little bit different, but it's actually really kind of cool at the same time. So we have the service date, which is 5/6. So we're going to keep that. I know I'm meeting with the client today on 5/2, but I need my ISP service to be dated for 5/6 in order for the plan to pull in properly to the service. So we're going to keep this 5/6. I got my start time, my end time. Again, you might need to talk to supervisor about duration. I'm going to keep this for now. I'm going to skip over my password and I'm going to come straight down here to the signature boxes. I want to, again, be sure I capture the client signature. Sometimes it's messy, but that's okay. Now I got the client signature. Let's say we have a parent at this time. Go ahead and preview. You can type in the parent name if you needed to. You don't have to, you can just accept it. And again, anybody else who may have attended, the best friend, other family members, maybe other providers, depending on the programming, there might be other providers. So you would capture all those signatures straight down the line here. Now, this is where it gets different. So instead of entering your password at this time, what I need you to do is enter your signature on the employee's signature box. What this will do is will allow you to save your signature today so that you have documentation of when you actually signed it and when the clients actually signed it as of today, 5/2. So I'm going to go ahead and click the capture signature and I'm going to then click attach save, pulls my signature in and attach. So now my signature is here. And it's going to give me a stamped signature date of today. So now we're not going to enter a password. We're not going to click the sign and submit button. Instead, we're going to click the save billing info button. And once we do this, you see this little notice there. Press this to save the current page's billing info. That's all the stuff we just did. Pull it back up. This will not complete or submit the service. Keep that in mind. So we're going to click the save billing info button. You're going to get a pop-up. Service cannot be signed before it takes place. Understood. I'm going to click OK. I'm done. Now we're done with this. Again, I'm not entering a password. What I'm going to do is on 5.6, I'm going to come back to this service because this is going to go into my incompletes. And on 5.6, I'm going to go into my incompletes. I'm going to edit it. I'm going to come to the billing info sign and submit page. I'm going to have to verify this stuff is still in here. Sometimes this stuff goes away. So I'll put that back in. My signatures will still be here. And then I'm going to enter my password and enter the sign and submit button. And click the sign and submit button. So now this is, we're going to show you how that happens. I have another client who I met with a few days ago, and we created an ISP a few days ago that actually goes into effect today. So I'm going to go head on over to my incompletes and we'll pull that out and show you how this actually looks in the end when you go to get to sign and submit this on 5.6, what this will look like. So what I'm going to do is go to the service tab, and then I go over here because this is my services, an incomplete service button here. Anytime you click the service tab and the incomplete services button you see here, that's always yours. It's never anybody else's, it's always yours. So here's some of my incompletes. And the incomplete service we just did here, this is the annual ISP, the one I just did today, it's sitting in my incompletes. I'll come back to that on 5.6 to sign and submit it. However, this is the client here, test client, that I met with a few days ago, and we already had their annual ISP meeting, and the ISP isn't going into effect until today. So all of this client's previous ISP stuff, previous ISP service and the TX Plus, it all expired yesterday. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this one here because I need to sign and submit this today. I'm going to go over here. So I click this edit button here and I click edit here again. So we see I've already done, my form is already done. Everything's in here. The date of my ISP is 5/2. My first summary review is due July 31st. I've got my assessments. I have everything here. You also see my TX Plus is pulling in here. So this is working really, really well. I'm going to go ahead and click, once I'm in here, because everything's done, I can click the complete button again. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything. I'm going to go straight to the billing info sign and submit button. This takes me right to the sign and submit page. So here we see I have my location, my diagnoses. Now, like I said, some things kind of unpopulate. I did this face-to-face. I got to put this back in. I got to put my billing group back in. I'm leaving my supervising position, my override is blank and no. The service date is here. My start and end times will still be here from when I did this service a few days ago. My signatures are here. I have my signature, the client, the parent, and if I had anybody else, they would still be showing down here. So now I'm ready to sign and submit this. Everything is already done. So I'm just going through mechanics. I'm going to enter my password. And I'm going to click the sign and submit button. Now it's going to put this here into the service list. I'm going to view it. I'm going to make sure everything is right. So here's my service plan. It's dated for 5/2. Come down here, my ISP, start date, end date, everything looks good. My review date. Now here's my TX Plus. My TX Plus pulled in, very nice. Everything starting on 5/2. I've got a problem, a goal, objective, and intervention. This is all that I created. If you created more, you should see it all. And everything starting in 5/2, nothing starting before. Now here's my signatures. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. My signatures are now dated for 4/29, 4/29, 4/29. This is the date that I met with the client and the family. I met with them on April 29, and I developed this ISP that starts in 5/2. So I have their signatures as of the date that I met with them, even though the service doesn't start till 5/2. I met with them in advance, and this looks really good. This is kind of like we want to see. We do really want to see that we've met in advance of the date of the start date, or we've met on the day of the start date and built everything that day, or if we've met in advance, that we have their signatures for that in advance. This looks really good. So this one is now done. So let's kind of just recap just a little bit. We're going to go back a little bit. The big takeaways from today, this is all we're going to cover, but the big takeaways from today is that the date of the service must be on or after the start date in the header in each PGOI. Because you see when that happens, everything pulls over really, really well. Be sure that you're seeing your plan pull there onto the right side in the colored sections, the red, the purple, the green, all those colors, it does pull in. And then they're over there on the left in that tree form. And if you don't see both of those, you're just going to capture the billing info, no sign and submit, let's contact the credible team for assistance. Again, remembering that the previous plan is end dated before the current plan, if you're making an annual plan, that the current plan is end dated before your new plan takes effect. You see how that works really well, as long as all the dates match up. We did not talk about discharge. We're going to talk about that at a different session. We talked about the initial plan. We talked about how to do that annual plan and making sure that you're using that Save Billing Info button when your annual plan starts in advance. So we're typing up those credible procedures, the TX Plus procedures. Once we're finished typing those up, we're going to make sure everybody gets them. And they will be put on our SharePoint site. So if you go to the SharePoint site, you go to the information systems and then to employee documents and then credible procedures. We have lots of credible procedures. Recommend that you check it out frequently. Lots of ways to navigate credible, lots of good guidance documents there to help you. And then if you have any questions, you can email the credible team at wtcsb.org. You can email myself as well, mcarpenter@wtcsb.org. But that's the end for today's Coffee with Credible. So please join us for our next sessions. We meet the second Wednesday of every month at 10 a.m. Invites will go out in advance. We welcome you to come and join us every month, learn something new. And in the next several Credible with Coffee sessions, we're going to continue our deep dive into the TX Plus. So we're going to be looking at how to end date those TX Pluses at discharge, how to do an ISP summary review, and then what to do when the Add TX Plus link is not visible there on the right, because sometimes it's not, but how can you fix that right from within the service itself? All right. So again, any questions, direct them to our credible team at wtcsb.org. And thank you and have a great day.